monarchy will be shifting in a slightly different direction.
I think it's safe to say that change is...
The document was already open. William had reviewed the final page. Camilla's name had been entered beneath the words Royal Foundation Trustee, and the pen was resting beside his hand. Then Princess Anne entered the room, closed the door behind her, and delivered a warning no one expected her to give the future king. The appointment would not proceed without a council vote. What followed was not a disagreement over paperwork. It was a battle over royal power itself. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. William stared at the page as Anne moved closer. The Royal Foundation, the charitable organization through which the Prince and Catherine direct work on mental health, early childhood, conservation, and emergency support, was becoming a blueprint for his reign. Giving Camilla a trustee's seat would place her inside strategy meetings, donor briefings, funding decisions, and projects tied to Catherine's public identity. Anne placed 2 fingers on the appointment paper and pulled it away before the pen touched the page. She told him that no royal, however senior, could be installed through a private promise when collective approval was required. A council vote, she explained, was the decision made by authorized members responsible for protecting the foundation's independence. Yet several members had not rejected Camilla. They had never been told her name was under consideration. William felt the rebuke more deeply because it came from Anne. He had viewed the appointment as reconciliation, a way to calm Charles, strengthen Camilla's position, and show that the senior households were no longer competing. Now the princess was treating his gesture of unity as a dangerous breach of trust. His expression hardened, but the hurt was clear. Anne saw that hurt and felt her resolve tremble. She had defended William through years of pressure, yet protecting him now meant refusing him. Allowing the appointment to pass unchecked would teach the future king that good intentions could replace consent. Worse, it would give one private conversation the power to reshape an institution, carrying the monarchy's future. William reached for the document, but Anne kept her hand upon it. She told him the crisis had not begun in this office, nor with Camilla's name typed across the final page. It had begun months earlier, when he made an assurance in a quiet room and believed no one beyond its walls would know. William could challenge Anne's authority in that moment, but he could not escape the question she had placed before him. Why had he promised Camilla a role powerful enough to unsettle the entire family? To the outside world, it appeared to be a dispute over a charitable appointment. Inside the family, it touched 4 private wounds. William feared becoming a king who could not hold his household together. Anne feared watching duty bend beneath sentiment. Camilla feared being permanently treated as an outsider despite years beside Charles. And the king feared that the people closest to him were preparing for a future in which his wishes would no longer carry the same weight. William carried that fear into a private conversation with Catherine. The Royal Foundation, the charitable organization used by the couple to lead work on mental health, early childhood, conservation, and public emergencies, had become more than a collection of causes. It was being watched as a preview of his future reign. Every trustee he appointed would reveal whose voice he trusted and what kind of monarch he intended to become. Catherine listened as the prince argued that Camilla's appointment could calm tensions around Charles. He said it would prove that the foundation belonged to the crown's future, not merely to one household. Yet she heard something else beneath his reasoning. He was trying to use institutional power to ease his father's private unhappiness. Her own name appeared throughout the foundation's planning papers, but no one had asked whether she accepted giving the queen consort influence over work closely tied to her identity. Camilla received the message shortly afterwards. William's office described the appointment as temporarily delayed. She read the words twice, removed her glasses, and placed them beside an untouched cup. The delay felt like humiliation, because she knew who had stopped it. Once again, Anne had become the person capable of closing a door before she could enter. Charles found his wife sitting alone beside a cold tea tray. He asked what had happened, although her silence had already told him enough. Camilla answered that William had offered her a seat at the table, but Anne had decided she had no right to reach the room. The monarch tried to reassure her, yet his discomfort exposed the truth. Charles had encouraged the prince to consider the appointment. He had issued no royal command, meaning a direct instruction made by the sovereign, but his appeal had carried emotional pressure. He feared Camilla would become isolated when power passed to the next reign, and he had asked his son not to let that happen. Anne understood how her intervention would look. Some would call it hostility. Others would say she had never accepted Camilla. But the princess feared something more dangerous. William beginning to believe that accountability was betrayal whenever it challenged someone he loved. Catherine finally asked him the question he had avoided. Was the appointment truly his idea, or had he made a promise after Charles placed him in an impossible position? That question led back to a winter evening at Sandringham, when one private conversation turned sympathy into an expectation Camilla would never forget. Months before Anne stopped the appointment, the conflict began beside a dying fire at Sandringham. The formal dinner had ended, the household had withdrawn, and Charles had left William and Camilla alone for what appeared to be an ordinary conversation. But Camilla spoke with unusual vulnerability that night. She told William she feared becoming invisible in the next chapter of the monarchy. His response was meant to comfort her. Instead, it created the promise that would later divide the family. Charles had entered that winter gathering consumed by questions of continuity and legacy. He knew authority would gradually move toward his son, and he feared his wife would lose both influence and protection when that transition came. The royal structure, the network of official roles, households, advisors, and charitable responsibilities surrounding the crown could preserve a person's relevance or quietly leave them behind. William had also been carrying a burden. He wanted the king's household and his own to stop appearing divided, especially as greater responsibilities moved toward him. Public unity mattered because every visible fracture weakened confidence in the monarchy's future. Yet peace inside the family was becoming harder to separate from private pressure. Camilla finally admitted what she had hidden throughout dinner. She feared the next reign would reduce her to a tolerated figure with no meaningful purpose. William listened, aware that Charles had deliberately left them alone. Then he gave the assurance that changed everything. "There will be a place for you in the Foundation," the prince told her. Camilla reached across the table and touched his wrist. He did not pull away, but regret moved through him almost immediately. The Foundation was not a private family possession. It was a public charitable institution, governed through trustees responsible for its strategy, finances, and independence. William had offered comfort, yet his words sounded like a guaranteed appointment. William left Sandringham burdened by what he had done. He knew the monarch wanted security for Camilla, but he also knew Catherine's work could not be rearranged merely to ease his father's fear. Still, silence allowed the promise to grow. Camilla carried a different feeling from that room. For the first time, she believed the future king had offered her more than acceptance. He had offered her an institutional future. Anne discovered the truth weeks later, through a council secretary. The official had received an unusual request to prepare a trustee eligibility summary without circulating it through normal channels. A governance advisor had marked one warning in red: any sensitive royal appointment required collective consultation before approval. Anne read the paper alone and removed her glasses slowly. William was not considering Camilla freely. He was attempting to honor a private promise through a public institution. She chose not to confront him yet. Anne waited until the final appointment document existed, ensuring he could no longer dismiss the danger as theoretical. By the time she entered William's office, she was forcing him to choose between a promise made in private and a duty that could not remain private any longer. The first exchange had been controlled. The second was not. William summoned Anne back after learning she had instructed the council secretary to freeze all paperwork connected to Camilla's nomination. No aides were present when the door closed. The future king stood behind his desk, furious that his authority had been challenged. Anne remained standing across from him, refusing the chair he offered. Then she delivered the sentence that shattered his defense. "You do not get to call secrecy unity." William insisted the Foundation's internal structure fell under his leadership. Trustees had been approached privately before, he argued, and formal approval had often followed later. A trustee was a person legally responsible for protecting a charity's work, money, and long-term direction. To him, speaking with Camilla before ratification was not unusual. It was preparation. Anne rejected that defense immediately. Sounding out a possible candidate was one thing. Preparing a completed appointment before the council could debate it was another. Ratification, the formal act of approving a decision already considered, could not become a ceremonial stamp placed beneath William's private choice. He had not followed the process. He had reversed it. William pushed the document across the desk and demanded to know whether she was opposing Camilla personally. Anne returned it without looking down. She told him she was not blocking the queen consort because of history, resentment, or family loyalty. She was blocking the method used to install her. William's anger broke through. He accused the princess of humiliating Charles when the king was already anxious about the future. He said she was treating reconciliation as corruption, punishing an attempt to hold the family together. Anne heard the pain beneath his fury, and for a moment, her voice softened. Anne told him she knew why the promise had been made. She understood how Charles had pressed upon his guilt and fear. But sympathy could not turn a private assurance into lawful authority. Worse, the papers showed Camilla would gain voting influence over a proposed restructuring, including projects closely linked to Catherine and their possible merger with broader royal programs. William said nothing. He had intended to present the appointment to the council as settled, allowing its members to endorse Camilla rather than debate her. Anne had now spoken aloud the truth he did not want named. William lifted the signing pen and held it for several seconds. Then he placed it down with deliberate force. He had not surrendered, but procedure had trapped him. Anne felt the deeper wound. In that moment, he resembled Charles at his most defensive, mistaking resistance for betrayal and obedience for loyalty. Then footsteps stopped outside the room. The door opened, and the king entered after hearing enough to understand that his own pressure had been exposed. Anne had challenged William's method, but Charles's arrival transformed the conflict into something larger, a monarch confronting the limits of the influence he still believed he possessed. Charles entered expecting to defend Camilla. Instead, he found his own judgment under examination. The appointment paper lay between William and Anne like evidence neither was willing to remove. For several seconds, the king said nothing. Then he asked whether his wife had been rejected. Anne answered with careful precision. Camilla had not been rejected because no lawful vote had yet taken place. What had been rejected was the assumption that the king's private desire could replace collective consent. Charles still carried enormous influence inside the family, but the royal foundation did not belong to his household. Its governance, the system of rules and people responsible for controlling a charity, existed to protect its independence. The council had to preserve donor confidence and prevent family pressure from deciding who received authority. Charles lowered himself into the chair Anne had refused. He lifted the appointment paper, read Camilla's name, and slowly placed it face down. The gesture carried more weight than an argument. For the first time, the monarch saw how his attempt to protect his wife appeared from outside, not as reassurance, but as favor. Anne did not soften the truth. She told him that his private appeal had placed William under pressure before any formal discussion began. By asking his son to secure Camilla's future, Charles had turned affection into expectation. The queen consort now looked dependent upon a promise made behind closed doors, and the king could not deny his part in creating that appearance. William waited for his father to defend him. He expected Charles to say the appointment had been necessary, or at least to confirm that the idea had begun with the monarch. But the silence continued. That hesitation struck the prince harder than Anne's accusation. He realized he might be left carrying full responsibility for a decision his father had quietly encouraged. Anne watched William's face change and turned back to Charles. She said she would not allow the future king to begin his reign believing love, guilt, or family obligation could bypass a governing body. Loyalty could guide judgment, but it could never replace consent. Charles attempted to regain control, yet Anne had already moved beyond him. The council chair had drafted a confidential objection, warning that Camilla's appointment could blur the boundary between the foundation and the king's household. Catherine was also preparing to withdraw from an upcoming strategy session unless William explained why her work was being placed under new influence without consultation. Charles understood the trap. Ordering Anne to stop would confirm every concern she had raised. His authority remained immense, but in that room, it could no longer direct the outcome. Charles asked for 24 hours before the council learned what had happened. Anne answered without hesitation. They had already been informed that an unauthorized appointment process had been halted. The decision had escaped the family room, and private disappointment was about to become immediate, visible consequence. Camilla did not learn the full truth from Charles. She learned it from the Foundation's acting secretary, who arrived with a sealed folder and language so formal that its meaning became unmistakable. Her nomination had been suspended. The council had not authorized the process. No trustee announcement would be made. Camilla listened without interruption, thanked the secretary, and waited until the door closed. Then she removed the brooch she had chosen for the expected announcement and placed it inside a drawer. Camilla had already begun preparing for the role. She had reviewed briefing papers on community programs and considered how her literacy work might connect with the Foundation's wider charitable platform. Those papers mattered because they made the appointment feel real. A trustee announcement, the formal public notice confirming who had joined the charity's governing body, had also been drafted by a small communications team as a symbol of unity between the king's reign and William's future leadership. Camilla walked toward the mirror after reading the suspension letter again. She looked at the brooch pinned to her jacket, removed it slowly, and closed it inside the drawer without calling an attendant. Anger would have been easier. What she felt instead was humiliation. Anne had not simply stopped an appointment. In Camilla's mind, the princess had made her appear to have reached for an honor that was never legitimately hers. Charles entered expecting tears or fury. Camilla gave him neither. She asked whether William had truly wanted her inside the Foundation, or whether the prince had made the offer because his father pressured him. The king opened his mouth, but no answer came quickly enough. His silence settled the question before words could rescue it. Camilla told him that protection given through pity was more painful than exclusion delivered honestly. She had spent years trying to prove that her value did not depend solely upon Charles, yet his intervention had made her look dependent upon royal favor once again. When the monarch offered to confront Anne, his wife refused. She would not allow him to fight another battle in her name. The damage was already spreading. Staff discovered that the halted announcement had been placed on a private publication schedule before the council had been consulted. One team member had preserved 2 drafts, a later version claiming council approval and an earlier version that mentioned no vote at all. The uncertainty had existed from the beginning. William felt the consequences immediately. He canceled a scheduled Foundation appearance rather than face questions from senior staff. Catherine attended alone, carrying the public responsibility while knowing his absence would deepen private concern. That evening, William contacted Anne and requested a meeting without Charles, Camilla, Catherine, advisors, or secretaries. He finally understood that the next conversation could not remain about paperwork. With Camilla wounded, Charles silent, and Catherine carrying the burden, William turned toward the woman who had stopped him and asked what Anne had truly been trying to save. They met after dark in a small sitting room with no files on the table and no officials waiting outside. William arrived prepared to defend himself again, but Anne did not mention Camilla at first. She spoke instead about the loneliness of authority, the moment when everyone around a future monarch begins telling him that his intentions are enough. Then she looked directly at William and told him the danger was not that he had wanted peace. The danger was believing peace excused the method. Anne reminded him that royal institutions survive only when personal feelings are restrained at the exact moment they seem most convincing. Compassion could explain a choice, but it could not legitimize one. The Foundation's governance, the rules, and people controlling how the charity makes decisions would become even more closely tied to William's reign. If public trust weakened there, doubts about his judgment would follow him toward the throne. William poured 2 glasses of water and placed one before Anne and left his own untouched. Silence held between them until he finally admitted what Charles had asked of him. The king had not demanded a specific title. He had simply told his son to ensure Camilla would not be abandoned when authority passed to the next generation. William confessed that refusing his father had felt cruel. Charles might have interpreted it as punishment, proof that old wounds still controlled the family's future. Consulting Catherine had felt equally dangerous because it would force her to become the person objecting to Camilla. The prince had tried to protect everyone, yet his secrecy had denied each of them an honest voice. Anne accepted her own share of blame. She could have warned him when she first discovered the eligibility request, but she had chosen to wait. William looked at her sharply. The princess explained that an early warning would have allowed him to produce another private compromise without confronting the belief beneath it. He needed to feel the weight of the choice before he could understand why it was wrong. Anne then corrected the assumption that had poisoned the conflict. Catherine had never demanded Camilla's exclusion. Her concern was that a position affecting her work was being created around her without consultation. The princess also said she would not automatically vote against the queen consort. If the nomination reached the council properly, she would judge it on merit. William finally asked the question beneath his resistance. Would withdrawing the appointment make him look weak? Anne answered that weakness was hiding an error, until others were forced to protect it. Strength was correcting it before permanent damage followed. William agreed to cancel the appointment, inform the council of his mistake, and create a written rule preventing any future trustee announcement before formal approval. Anne rose to leave but gave him one final instruction. Camilla deserved to hear the decision from him directly, not through Charles, a secretary, or another sealed letter. The procedure could be repaired on paper, but healing could not begin until William faced the woman to whom he had promised a place he never had the authority to give. By morning, the dispute was no longer contained within Windsor. A London newspaper appeared with a stark front page, a photograph of Anne entering a council meeting beneath the headline, "The Princess Who Said No." Broadcasters framed the story as the first major test of William's future authority. Outside Buckingham Palace, tourists gathered around phones showing the same image. Yet behind the headlines, William was preparing for a quieter and more difficult moment, telling Camilla that the promise he made could not stand. The public split almost immediately. Some praised Anne for defending proper governance, while others accused her of humiliating the king's wife. Palace communications staff struggled to prevent the dispute from becoming either a family feud or a constitutional crisis. A constitutional crisis meant a conflict serious enough to raise doubts about how royal authority and institutional rules were being used. Their final statement called it a corrected internal appointment process. But those careful words could not contain the emotion already surrounding the story. Outside Buckingham Palace, a broadcaster raised the newspaper before a growing crowd. Tourists turned their phones toward the headline as the princess's private intervention became the defining image of the scandal. That evening, a national program called the episode "A Collision Between Reconciliation and Accountability." The discussion no longer focused only on Camilla's suitability. It questioned whether William was ready to exercise greater power. Anne watched the coverage alone and disliked what she saw. The newspapers had turned her into a rebel standing against the future king. She told an aide that the conflict had never been about defeating William. It had been about stopping one decision before secrecy became habit. Yet the more the public celebrated her resistance, the deeper the prince's embarrassment became. Camilla endured a different wound. Commentators questioned whether she had used Charles to secure influence inside the foundation. The accusation transformed her private fear of exclusion into a public image of ambition. She had wanted a meaningful role, but she had never wanted the country to believe she had demanded it through the king. The foundation then released meeting minutes confirming that no vote had taken place and that the nomination was withdrawn before council consideration. Meeting minutes were the official written record of what a governing body discussed and decided. Their publication proved Anne's procedural objection had been justified. William met Camilla without Charles present. He apologized for promising something he had no authority to guarantee. He admitted that using her appointment as a symbol of unity had been unfair to her and to the foundation. Camilla answered with painful honesty. She had wanted the position, but not as compensation for the past. She accepted the withdrawal and asked that her name never be resubmitted. The council had restored the rules, and Camilla had surrendered the role, but the monarchy's final verdict now depended on whether William chose self-protection or accountability. William did not allow the palace to describe the appointment as a misunderstanding. At the next Royal Foundation Council meeting, he entered before the other members, placed the withdrawn nomination on the table, and accepted responsibility. Camilla would not become a trustee. No retrospective vote would be staged to protect appearances. The process had been wrong. Anne had been right to stop it, and the foundation would adopt new safeguards. In that admission, the future king finally transformed humiliation into leadership. William took the same pen he had once intended to use for Camilla's appointment and signed a new governance rule. Governance meant the formal system controlling how the foundation made decisions and protected its independence. From that moment forward, every trustee nomination would require consultation, a documented review, and a full council vote before any public announcement could be prepared. The council approved the safeguard unanimously. No future monarch, heir, royal household, or family member would again be able to turn a private assurance into a completed appointment. The foundation had survived the crisis because Anne had insisted that affection could not replace accountability. William then addressed the members without hiding behind palace language. He admitted that his desire to protect Charles and reassure Camilla had clouded his judgment. The prince did not blame his father, and he did not portray himself as a victim of pressure. He accepted the failure as his own, demonstrating the responsibility the princess had demanded from him. Anne did not celebrate. She closed her folder and told William that the rule mattered more than who had won the argument. Their trust had been strained, but it had not been destroyed. The future king now understood that her resistance had come from loyalty, not hostility. Camilla redirected her attention toward literacy and community work, choosing influence earned through her own efforts rather than authority granted through a disputed favor. The queen consort lost the appointment she had expected, but she regained control over the way her value would be measured. Charles faced his own reckoning. He apologized privately to Camilla for turning fear about her future into pressure upon their son. Later, the king acknowledged to Anne that protecting the monarchy sometimes required refusing even the wishes of the monarch. Catherine returned to the Foundation's strategy work with her authority clarified. She had never demanded Camilla's exclusion, and her restraint prevented the conflict from becoming a permanent family division. Anne had not attacked William, Camilla, or Charles. She had refused to let guilt reshape public duty. By stopping the prince, she had prepared him for kingship. The appointment never reached a vote, but the monarchy still delivered its verdict. Authority is safest not when no one dares challenge it, but when even a future king can be stopped, corrected, and made stronger before the pen reaches the page. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.